Hi, everybody. Today we are going to talk a little bit about how to recognize when your artwork is finished so that you can avoid overworking it. So, how do you know when your work is finished? Well, today's exercise will hopefully help you explore exactly that. I usually paint in series, and I've prepared 4 portraits for today's exercise. However, instead of showing you the making of each piece from start to finish as our usual, today I'll show you the process behind the series as a whole. I'll start with the first step of the 4 of them and going through the final steps until they are all finished. I hope that makes sense to you and that it's not going to be confusing, okay? So I always start with one layer, then I move to the next piece while the first one dries. And by the time I finished the base of the fourth painting, the first one is completely dry and ready for the next stage. So today you'll see the sequence in which I painted them, and I hope it won't be confusing, okay? So let's begin. My concept for today's compositions is very simple. I want to create some soft watercolor backgrounds and then add a raw, sketchy, drawings on the top. So that's going to be very expressive. And once again, the idea behind this exercise is to show that you don't need to focus on precision, on realism, on perfection. What matters most is emotion. Of course, technical skills are always going to be important. However, more than anything, your work should express feelings and intention. If your lines are a little bit wobbly, make that your mark. If your colors are odd, make that your mark, okay? Always be willing to grow and learn, but don't repress yourself too much. Otherwise, you'll never evolve. So for today's concept, we're simply creating a watercolor background and sketching on the top of it. I'm drawing from imagination, but you can use a model, of course, if you prefer. In fact, I recommend practicing from imagination first because when you do, you're not comparing your work to anything external, okay? You're relying on your own ideas and instincts. Later on, when you start working with visual reference, you'll already have a sense of how your colors, your lines, and your compositions come together. That way, when you use a model, you won't just copy it. You will make your own version of it. You're not going to paint it as you see it. You're going to paint it as you feel it. And that is more beautiful. So now let's continue. This first layer of watercolor is very light and fluid, and it will take about 15 to 20 minutes to dry completely. And once it's dry, we can begin adding what should be the final touches. At this stage, I'm adding loose, sketchy lines, not trying to be precise. It's almost an abstraction. And right here, this is actually the very moment I should have stopped. It already looked good. I only needed to add some contrast, perhaps to the skin or to the background to make the focal point clearer. But instead, I kept adding more and more lines. And that's where things started to get messy. The original concept got lost. The same thing happened with the second piece, and it was the same thing that happened with the other two. So in the end, everything looked a bit overworked, messy, and even immature. as if I didn't know what I was doing. So I couldn't really use any of these. So what should I do now? I could simply throw them all away and start again, but we must learn how to fix our mistakes, okay? We can't just ignore them or pretend they didn't happen. Recognizing our mistakes is one of the most valuable skills one can develop, not only in art, but in life. Owning our mistakes doesn't make us weaker, it makes us wiser, I think. In art, we learn to repair, to adapt, to transform a mistake into something meaningful. And it's not just about fixing what went wrong, but about making amends, learning from the experience, and doing our best not to repeat it. So that's how both art and our lives becomes more authentic, more beautiful. Since these pieces are made with watercolor and watercolor pencil, I could reactivate the pigment with water, but they were already so messy that I needed to clean them up. And for this series, I decided to cover them with acrylics. And because acrylics are wet, they slightly reactivate the watercolor underneath, allowing me to use that layer as a base for the next one. Then I drew over the acrylics with oil pastels, since watercolor wouldn't work properly on top of acrylics. Technically, it is possible, but unnecessarily complicated. So, for once, let's keep things simple, okay? I repeated this process for all the four portraits, covering them and leaving them to dry. And you can still see traces of the watercolor underneath, which gives the next layer some depth. I always encourage you to start by painting from imagination. Of course, if you have aphantasia, which is a difficulty of visualizing mental images, you will need to use models. But if you don't, please try sketching without one because it helps you discover your unique artistic language. Art isn't about replicating nature. It's about expressing how nature lives inside you. It's not how you see a person, it's how you feel them and how you translate that feeling onto the canvas. So when you later use external references, those feelings will be already internalized, making it easier not to simply copy what you see. Now, for the final stage, once everything is clean and dry, we'll finish properly this time. I'll recreate the same concept, which is a colorful base with sketch like lines on top. And once I start the lines, I use kitchen paper to smudge them. And then I refine with pastel pencils. And before you know it, the work is finally done. As you know, our mission here is to share with you that you can make art. More, you can make good art. As long as you have passion, you can create something meaningful, something beautiful, something that you'll be truly proud of. Regardless if you're just beginning or if you're doing it for a while, but you don't have any formal training in art. And if you're still searching for your own style, or if you're still experimenting with different materials or techniques, or if you simply want to try something new, today we're going to explore how to identify your stopping point, that precious moment when you can say with confidence, okay, I am finished. So let me share something very personal with you. A little time after I graduated from art university, I began receiving commissions. But my main issue back then was that I could never finish anything. I was never satisfied with my own work. I would often trash entire collections because I struggled to make them look as they appeared in my head. And it was only when I switched to the graphic work that I do today that I began to find peace with my creative process. In that context, I simply had to follow the client's brief, and when the client says it's finished, I have to accept that and let go. But when I am working on a personal project, when I am my own client, I am never fully satisfied. I am always searching for something more. And another thing is that I am dyslexic. So even though dyslexia is usually associated with reading issues, I sometimes feel that it affects how I read images too. It can take me a while to see a picture as a whole, to understand how all the parts work together. So often I need to step away from my work for a bit, then come back with fresh eyes to notice what I couldn't see before. My mind is always 100 things happening at once. So it's always been a challenge for me to know when to stop, to know when everything is already in place. And this doesn't happen just with art. This is the same when I'm cleaning the house or exercising or doing almost anything. I struggle to know when something feels complete. I'm telling you this so that you know that I truly understand and empathize if you experience the same. So, if you're learning on your own or just beginning your creative journey without formal guidance, this can be especially challenging. And I know that. This time, the result retains the same expressive concept as the original idea, but it feels more cohesive and professional. It's still colorful and sketch like, but now it is more intentional and unified. So these are the results of what we've done today. I hope you learned something new today and that you now understand better how sometimes less is definitely more. And if you make mistakes, you don't have to discard your work. There's often a way to bring it back. If you take a step back, assess what you truly want to achieve, and use what you already have to get there. As always, keep on practicing and thank you for joining us.